Hi, everybody. Welcome to the GrowCast show. My name is Lisa White, your host, and welcome to episode 88. So today I have a special guest with me. His name is Iqbal Nikmatullah, and he's an associate estate planning practitioner at AEPP. Hi, welcome to the show, Iqbal.
Thank you for having me. I hope you're in good health.
Yes, I'm sure we'll get lots of expertise from you this session. So I'll start by asking you the first question. How is your advisory practice different from the others?
That's a very good question indeed. Okay, and I get it quite a lot. Okay, I understand where this question is coming from because I believe people have this notion that all advisors are the same. Okay, so for us, what makes us different? What makes me different? Okay, it's not just about what the people have. Okay, what my clients have, but rather what they believe in. Okay, what are some of the values? Okay, what are some of the causes that they care for? Because all of these information, all of these beliefs that they have, okay, all form a part of the equation that I need to factor in, okay, in order to do proper legacy planning for them.
And when you say legacy planning, does that mean only having life insurance or?
Okay, life insurance most definitely is one of the many different pieces when it comes to doing legacy planning. I would say in terms of life insurance, okay, it is a very powerful tool and one that we should not look down upon. The reason being is that it offers capital injection, okay, not if, but when your family needs it the most. And you also have to understand that in terms of the different assets that people bring into legacy planning, okay, not all of them are immediately liquidated instantly or overnight.
Can legacy planning be done without insurance?
Technically speaking, yes, okay, but it would take more time, more effort, and more resources to achieve the same results as opposed to using insurance. Because for a majority of the people that I meet, their net worth or some of their assets, okay, are locked behind immovable things. Okay, example, property. Actually, property is one of the biggest examples. Okay, majority of people's net worth comes from there, right? We're talking about 2 million, 3 million. Okay, but what they don't realize is that it is illiquid. Okay, and to pass on said property to your family, okay, may prove too much of a challenge, okay, without an additional inflow of liquid funds to settle whatever legal processes that may happen.
Is legacy planning only for the rich or ultra high net worth?
I get that sentiment a lot, okay, from the people that I meet. They believe they have to be millionaires, billionaires, okay, thinking of people like, I don't know, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos kind of level. Okay, but I want to put it out there that it is not just okay for the ultra rich or the high net worth. Okay, in fact, normal everyday people, just your typical Singaporeans walking down the street, I believe they have more need for legacy planning than all these high net worth. Reason being, okay, for all these rich people, ultra high net worth, to them, I would say a mistake could just be that, a costly mistake that can be paid for, right, using their fortune. But for the everyday people, a single mistake could bring down the entire family's financial means.
So when you say mistake, can you elaborate more on these mistakes?
Common mistakes. Okay, so some of the common mistakes include not anticipating things like your legal costs, duties, okay, or perhaps even tax, right? Okay, so all of these typically require payment upfront, especially when you're talking about dealing with lawyers and, you know, all these legal processes. Unfortunately, okay, like I've touched on earlier, okay, in one of the other questions, some of these families' net worth may just be tied to one asset, and it is an immovable asset. So how are you going to proceed from there? You may be forced to liquidate the property itself, and that could take months.
So would you say that's one of the consequences of not doing legacy planning?
Not doing it properly.
Okay. Is legacy planning only for those who are maybe 55 and above, like seniors and above?
All right. I understand where this question is coming from. The idea behind it is that once you turn 55 and above in Singapore, you have access to your CPF monies. Okay, so it is with this rationale that people think I'm only going to start the planning when I have the monies in my hands. Okay, but that's not true. Everybody has different things they would want to protect in different stages of their life. Okay, be it right after getting married, having kids, your matrimonial home. Okay, so I don't think these applies exclusively to those who are 55 and above. In fact, I believe it's more important for those who are under 55.
So, what are three good reasons to start legacy planning?
Well, firstly, when you're younger, you definitely have more options because you're still healthy, you have access to disposable income, okay? And I would say in terms of the financial instruments or the legal instruments that you can use, there's definitely a whole lot more for you to consider or to play with. Secondly, when you are much younger, okay, you'd have more of a time frame to correct your course, so to say. So if you've made a little mistake, you know, okay, I still have some time, okay, to maybe make changes, as opposed to maybe when you're older and you realize that I don't have the time, nor the resources, nor do I have the energy left, okay, to change my course. And last but not least, early planning gives your family the assurance earlier. At least they know throughout your entire life, you've believed in something and you want to protect that regardless of what may come.
How does Islamic inheritance law, Faraid, affect how Muslims in Singapore pass down their property?
Okay, so let me start things off with a comparison. All right. So for non-Muslims, we have this thing called the Intestate Succession Act. Okay, where depending on who you leave behind after you pass on, okay, be it you have parents, you have spouse, you have your children, it would be quite straightforward for me to say that in the event that, let's say, you leave behind a spouse and a child, half goes to the spouse, half goes to the child. But in terms of Islamic inheritance law or Faraid, each individual heir, okay, that you have has a predetermined share. So, for example, spouses with children, okay, especially the wives with children only inherit 1/8. Without children, it's a quarter. If you compare that to the husband's shares, all right, so if the husband has children with him, okay, he's entitled to a quarter. Okay, if he has no children, it's half. Okay, and so on and so forth. Basically, there's a predetermined share in place for Muslims, right? You cannot just give away your properties via a will. Okay, Faraid would require you to satisfy the above requirements, which means to say that everyone you leave behind, your parents, your siblings, your children, has to get their share out of your estate. That is the main difference, and how it could affect legacy planning for us Muslims, right? Is that if you only have a property and your intention for it was to pass it on to your wife, okay, for her to shelter the children, you may find that in certain situations, you may need to liquidate said property, which then begs the question, where is your family going to stay?
So if you had a client that, is it possible for clients to navigate their own way through this estate planning, or do they have to go through that law?
It really depends, all right? One very straightforward way, okay, for us Muslims to leave our properties for our families to inherit is by ensuring that first and foremost, the property is held under joint tenancy. So joint tenancy would imply that it is a full gift to whoever is the survivor. But aside from that, there are other ways for you to ensure that said property or whatever legacy you want to leave behind to your family is protected and passed down to the correct individuals. It just requires good planning.
Why might affluent Muslims in Singapore run into challenges with passing on property to their children?
Okay, so this directly, I would say, links to the previous question. So what challenges they might face, first and foremost, is not understanding the tenancy agreements. Because in Singapore, we can hold properties under one of three tenancy agreements: joint tenancy, tenancy in common, or own it as a single, right? So not many realize that each of these three structures have their own distinct methods, okay, of liquidation upon death, right? Okay, so the challenge that could possibly happen, which I see a lot, okay, happening in our community actually, is that there's not enough liquid assets, okay, for the families to utilize to go through the entire inheritance or legacy process after somebody passes on. And then what happens? They're forced to liquidate all these other assets, which take time, which cost money, and at the end of the day, you're potentially left with nothing.
So, what practical solutions exist for Muslim families who want to keep a family home within the next generation?
So when you mention legacy, right, first thing that comes to people's minds is that I want my matrimonial home or my family home to be passed down to the next generation and possibly whoever comes after. So in terms of practical solutions, but first let me touch on the common solution, okay, that most people think about or that they know about. Okay, it's putting said property into trust. Okay, but you have to understand when you put a property into trust, okay, for Singaporeans, for Muslims especially, right? Okay, it would incur fees, okay, that could amount to more than half of the property's value. Okay, so to put it into perspective, if you want to put a 2 million property into trust, you're looking at fees of at least 1 million and above. Yeah, so that's not very practical, is it? A more practical solution, I would say, is to ensure that there's enough liquidity in your estate such that you give the opportunity or the choice to a surviving family member to buy over said properties.
Well, that's very interesting. You shared a lot of things that I didn't actually know, so I learned quite a bit. Can't I just let my family figure it out?
That's a very common objection I get, especially from the older generation. Okay, I mean, they've been through a lot of hardships. Okay, so they believe that hardship is what molds you into what you become. It molds you into a figure of success, so to say. Okay, but from what I've seen most of the time is that most families are usually in a state of grief, okay, and a bit of confusion, okay, when somebody passes. So they're not in the emotional state of mind to start thinking about money or to start thinking about legal problems. So this is where I believe we as the generation that wants to ensure our families don't have to go through any of these tiring legal processes and the unneeded fees, we should take the initiative to make sure that we plan properly and ensure that it's a smooth transfer.
Legacy planning, it sounds complicated and expensive. Is it?
I mean, initially, I would say most people do have that way of thinking that it is expensive, it is complicated, requires a lot of legal documentations, legal jargon, right? It doesn't have to be. You can start off with doing the simple things. First, by narrowing it down. What is it you want to protect? Who do you care for? What are the causes that you care for? Next question is, okay, to what can you do to protect some of these said assets, some of these beliefs, some of these causes that you care for? It starts, I would say, with a simple step. You don't need to do the whole thing from A to Z. Just starting somewhere is sufficient.
If something happened tomorrow, do most families actually know what to do?
Based on my own experience, I've had several of my grandparents pass on, okay, and I've seen the confusion firsthand from their immediate next of kin, which would be my parents, my uncles, aunties, right? Okay, it's not that most families don't know what to do, okay, but rather they were never shown how. They were never taught how. Okay, this isn't something that, we learn in school. Okay, it's not like English, math, science, or these kind of things. This is something where I feel that most of us only learn when the time comes, but by then it may already be too late.
A lot of people, they work their whole lives to build something meaningful. Do you think they actually realize how much of this is left to chance when they don't do any proper planning?
A very good analogy I share to the people I meet is that Rome wasn't built overnight, but it toppled overnight. So likewise, imagine yourself in your later years, 50s, 60s. You have a beautiful house, okay? You have a beautiful family. You have beautiful grandchildren running in your front yard. You're probably, a business owner, okay, looking to pass on his business or her business to your family, okay? But because of the lack of planning, little do you know that when you pass on, everything that you've built up would crumble overnight. And worst case scenario is that those millions, billions that you have, everything beautiful that you've just envisioned, it goes to the wrong people. That to me is what failure looks like.
So let's say legacy planning wasn't actually that complicated or expensive. If I could take one small step to protect my family's interests, what would you advise that would be?
Well, first and foremost, I believe you need to start a conversation, an honest heart-to-heart talk, not only with your family, but with somebody who knows the subject at hand. And then from there, once you have an understanding of what your current situation is and where you want it to be, you can take very simple steps, ensuring there's enough liquidity in your estate, ensuring you have the right tools that run in the background for you, and just making sure that the next of kin, your next of kin, have a peace of mind, knowing that the transfer of wealth, that your legacy is going to be seamless, and most of all, your wishes are honored.
Well, it was great chatting with you today. I learned so much about estate planning that I never knew about before, and I'm sure our viewers have a lot of valuable information that they got from this session today.
Glad to share.
Thank you. So that was Iqbal, the Associate Estate Planning Practitioner, who gave us his words of wisdom. And thank you very much.